Hi, I want to have a quick chat with you ahead of the annual parochial church meeting or parish meeting that's coming up on the 25th of April. It's going to be held by Zoom and it's going to start at 11:30. As I said back in February in my pastoral letter then, I wanted everyone to give some thought to whether or not they might be able to serve the church by being part of the church council, because there's some really important stuff coming up this year. So let me go back to my presentation and talk to you more about that. The PC is pretty much the engine of the parish and of the church. And so it decides what the church looks like, what the church does, its ethos, how it communicates its character, the impression and feelings people get when they're in church with us. So it decides how church works, and people on the PC have practical skills to make things happen. And this year is a particularly important year because we're in the second year of our interim process. And interim ministry usually only lasts 2 years, at most 3 years. And so by the end of this calendar year, we're looking to do two things, to have these in sight, if not finished. The first is to come up with our mission action plan, decide what St. Lawrence's is going to do for the next 5 years, what areas of its life it's going to develop, what it's going to give priority to, what it's going to take priority away from, and to come up with a parish profile. And the point of having those two documents together is both to set the direction of the church for the next 5 years, but also to make a substantive appointment of a new minister to help deliver those outcomes. So the parish profile means looking at where we are now as a parish and where we want to be, and articulating the detail of that to a wider audience. So not only are we an important time in terms of St. Lawrence's life as it stands by itself, we also find ourselves coming out of the COVID lockdown with all the impact that's had. There are people in the local area who've been furloughed or lost their jobs. The advent of mental health problems is really high at the moment. But positively, people have also discovered, I think, quite a strong sense of community and belonging to each other in the local area. And I think St. Lawrence's has an important role to play in bringing people back together in community, but also helping people to understand what community can be about, its richness and its value, as well as supporting how our community functions in the local area. Now, you don't know, I've done some survey work recently, and I just want to look at one element of that as we think about what the PC's task over the next year is going to be. And that's the table that looks at, the survey work that looks at where St. Lawrence's is on a life cycle. Now, ideally, what you have in a church are people of all different ages doing different things together and separately to make up a common life together that's rewarding for everyone. And the point of this survey question was to gain a sense of where people think St. Lawrence's is overall, where it is on a collective life cycle. Now you'll see from the graph that the most responses were for going stale. That's just over 31% of those who responded to the survey felt that St. Lawrence's is going stale, with a further 3.5% feeling that it was a point of stagnation. So that's a really important headline figure to take account of. It means a third of the people who respond to the survey, a sample of the congregation, which we have no reason to think is not representative, clearly feel that the church is in quite a bad place in terms of being past its best. The next category up is described as established, a model for others, but also with creeping complacency and a small group of people making decisions about what's happening in the church, rather than a sense that everyone is involved in its life. Now, the next peak after that is exploring possibilities and choosing priorities. So we had just under 20% of people in that category. Most of the people's comments in that category indicated they felt that the church was stale or stagnant, but with the process of interim ministry, new horizons were opening up, so there were new possibilities. So the picture overall here, perhaps unsurprisingly, given that we're in an interim process, is that St Lawrence is past its best, going a bit stale, and needs some new life. And clearly the decisions made by the PCC are going to be key in not only working out the direction to head in, so that things get better, so things are renewed, but also resourcing that change as well. The PCC could make decisions as to what it wants to do with its future, but it didn't also resource those. There isn't very good way forwards. So you can have ideas and want to implement them, but if you can't resource implementing them, then you're kind of stuck. One of the areas we've been looking at as a PCC is our children and youth ministry, not least in light of the survey work that was done on that. The PCC's decision was it wants to employ a full-time children and youth worker. The cost of that would be £35,000 with on-costs, and we're certainly not in a financial position as a parish to do that at the moment. So we need to think about developing new income streams in order to make that post a reality, having committed to having that post in the future. In the meantime, we're going to need to work out how to look after our children and young people at the present time in worship, knowing that our cohort of present youth and children's leaders feel under-resourced. And as I said in my subsequent pastoral letter, the PCC's made a decision to bring our children into our main worship and serve their needs in that context. So with that £35,000 label, it's apparent that we're going to need to think about money as a PCC over the next year as well, with a view to what happens over the next 5 years and our development needs. We've lost quite a lot of money through the COVID crisis. So 2020's budget gave a deficit of £40,000, and we're anticipating a deficit of £20,000 in 2021. So in addition to funding new initiatives, like having a youth and children's worker, our reserves are going to be significantly eaten into, not least in relation to some of the maintenance work that's going to take place and can't be put off any longer for St Lawrence's. We also have scouts on site, which is excellent, but they need a new home, and they don't have plans that fit for the parish in terms of providing a new home. So we're going to need to provide a new home for them if they're going to stay with us. So again, that's another significant cost that we need to look at and work out how we're going to meet it. And as I mentioned, there's ongoing maintenance work to do as well, not least in terms of replacing the electrics and the heating within the church, but also urgent tree works that need to be done as well. So there are lots of challenges, but there are also lots of opportunities. And I think now is the time to step forward into the future and think creatively and work creatively together in order to make change happen. If you're up for being part of that, if you're up for being part of making that stuff happen, and I think it's amply possible for us to turn things around and make those things happen, I'd be very glad if you were to drop me a line. There's a process to go through in order to apply to be part of the PCC. I know this is a difficult time in terms of there being a lot of change around and a lot of demands post-COVID, but the church could be part of the answer to that rather than part of the problem. So I hope that you're up for being part of the answer to that, and you'll drop me a line and we can work out how you can support St Lawrence's to become what it needs to be for the next 5 years to serve all of us as well as our local community.